Hi, everyone, and welcome to Why Reflexivity is the Missing Piece of Your Leadership. My name is Aang, and I'm going to be walking you through about 30 or 45 minutes of some information that is based on our book series, The Leadership Consciousness Essentials, which is a 5-volume series in which I cover a whole range of topics. But I am super, super excited to be here with you all. Now, whether or not you have been following the Conscious Leader newsletter, whether you want to dive into the Leadership Consciousness book series, or if you're just landing on this page for the first time, I want you to say thank you so much for being here. Your presence matters to me, and this moment for you matters as well. And so my goal with this is to make these as practical and relatable as possible. And so if at any point you have any questions or concerns, you want to provide some additional context, or you want me to provide additional context, please let me know. And yeah, so a little bit of background here. This is going to be the first webinar in a series of webinars that are tied to our Conscious Leader newsletter. And the newsletter is a twice-a-month newsletter in which we talk about topics that come up in the book series. And each month we're going to take time to explore some of those concepts in a little bit more depth via a webinar. And so this is the first webinar in this series. And next month we will have another webinar that covers the topics from the 2 newsletters from that month. I want to just start by saying that this is a safe space for you to come, to pause, to breathe, and to tap into some of your intuition and your inner self so that you can hopefully rise to meet any leadership challenges that you may be struggling with. Now, I want to begin with a slow breath together here, because presence and groundedness is such an important part of this work. You know, if we have an activation in our nervous system or overcomplicated thoughts in our brain, that is going to impact our ability to be here, to take in the information, and to get what we need. And so I want to go ahead and just pause for a moment. I want everyone to take a nice deep breath in and slow exhale out. If you need to do 2 more of those breaths, please do that. And what I want you to notice as you're sitting here or as you're taking your extra breaths is just notice where you are. Notice what you're bringing into this space. And know that there is no need to fix or shift anything. The goal is to simply be here, to be present, and to be willing and open to take in the information we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead and get started with why reflexivity is the missing piece of your leadership journey. Now, we're going to begin this series with what I believe is the most foundational and often overlooked piece of leadership practice, and that is the ability to actually practice reflexivity. So everything that we cover in the future books and in the future webinars will be supportive of this main concept. And so we're going to start with reflexivity to kind of give you an overview and the ultimate aim of what we want you to be able to get from your leadership. And then we will, in follow-on webinars, dive in a little bit deeper so that all of the additional concepts that relate and help you to get to this place of reflexivity will give you the practical tools and the frameworks on how to do that. But right now, we want you to have a general understanding of what the goal is. Now, leadership reflexivity basically just asks us to slow down long enough to notice the lens that we're leading through, to become aware of our personal identities, our beliefs, our emotions, and our lived experiences, and how those shape our leadership in every moment of our day and our lives, especially in complex circumstances. Now, whether or not we're conscious of this or not, all of these things are playing a role in our leadership. And especially right now, with all of the complexities that are happening in the world, it's not easy to take this kind of approach. And I want to just recognize as well that leaders today are trying to lead in contexts that are really emotionally heavy. They're fast paced, they're charged, they are deeply human, and especially as more and more companies are letting people go, bringing in AI and augmenting everything that they're doing with technological advances, the future of leadership is going to be defined by our human skills. And so I want to just acknowledge that right now is just the beginning. And as we move forward over the next 20 years, it's only going to become more and more human. And what I mean by this is that across teams and organizations, the people that are still there in those organizations are carrying fear and grief and disconnection, all while trying to be productive and to make good decisions so they don't have to worry about losing their jobs. And I think one thing that I know from this work is that we cannot let others we cannot lead others in meaningful ways if we are actually disconnected from ourselves. And reflexivity is what is going to bring us back into relationship with ourselves and the impact that we're having. So I want to first start by what is reflexivity. And in the first book, which is actually titled Leadership Reflexivity, we covered that reflexivity is an intentional and daily practice of kind of both turning inward with our own presence and then at the same time adjusting our behaviors and our actions outwardly to best support our teams based on that internal guidance that we've gotten. And this is a consistent inquiry into what is actually shaping our behavior, whether or not those behaviors are aligned with who we say we want to be, and whether or not we could actually make improvements on our behaviors to better reach the outcomes that we desire. Now, reflexivity in this context is about attunement to our body, to our breath, to our beliefs and our assumptions and our patterns, our social relationships, and the larger context of the collective, whether that is your team or your organization, your society, your nation, your United Nations, whatever it is, returning to that ability to recognize all of those things, your body, your breath, your beliefs, and so on. And then expanding your insights into conscious and intentional actions. And this is a conscious choice to make adjustments to your leadership presence and your style as needed so that you can be the best leader that you want to be within your teams and your communities. Now, all too often, we tend to lead from a place of unconscious reactions that are shaped by things like urgency, fear, control, past traumas, and we just intuitively react. We react to our nervous system activation, we react to the thoughts that come to our brain, and we do it on autopilot because that's what we were designed to do. And that's what we are told that we have to do as leaders to get in there, to solve the problems, and to do what needs to be done. And in many organizational cultures, these reactions are actually reinforced and rewarded. And so when we talk about practicing reflexivity, we want you to be able to create an internal space to be able to pause and to notice so that we can then shift our external behaviors and actions to an intentional response that is rooted in our values, our clarity, and our compassion, which is what is going to lead to our congruence in our relationships. Now, one thing I want to do for everyone is I want to just give you a brief overview, just a couple of minutes, about the leadership reflexivity cycle, which is the 3-step process that I have created as part of this to help people understand something easy and tangible that they can come back to help them in this process. And so I'm going to go ahead and pop up an image on the screen. And this is just an image of the reflexivity cycle. And it's going to show you the 3 steps that we're going to walk through here. The first is about slowing down enough to notice your internal state. And this stage is called the awareness stage. You are aware of your thoughts, your emotions, the signals that your actual body is giving to you. If there are any tension in your shoulders, in your jaw, in your face, or any cultural dynamics or identity triggers that are shaping how you're experiencing that moment, this is where we ask you to tune into that. And we want you to ask things like, what am I noticing in myself, around me, and what is actually happening underneath the surface? And then the second phase of this is evaluation. And this is where we start to get a little critical and make analysis of the information that we have gathered in our awareness phase. So this is where we actually make meaning and we try to understand. And so we ask ourselves things like, what is underneath my response? What are the values that are being either activated or challenged in this moment? What are the beliefs or the lived experiences that might be shaping how I'm showing up? What perspectives am I missing? And if you're using this to redefine an action or a behavior, then you want to ask yourself questions like, did what I tried to do to fix my mistake or my error or to try to improve employee engagement or whatever it is actually do what I intended it to do? And you're gonna both internally and externally get feedback from people in your environment. Most of this is going to be an internal process, but especially as you start to adjust and you start to play with the cycle, you're going to want to get external feedback on the actions that you've taken, whether or not they led you to the goals that you are trying to get to. And this phase specifically is about honesty with yourself, humility in the process, and compassion with yourself. Because again, we are all human and we're all going to make mistakes. And the key defining thing here is whether or not we actually fix those mistakes and make adjustments in the future. And that leads us to the adjustment phase, which is that it's not enough to just notice. To notice that we didn't say something that we should have said, that we did something maybe that did not help the situation and maybe even made it worse. And we have to actively choose to do something different. And every time it's needed, essentially. And like I said, we are all human beings and we all make mistakes. And at some point or another, the key defining factor is going to be whether or not we adjust our behaviors and we fix our mistakes so that we can restore our integrity. And this means that we have to actually adjust our behaviors and our actions or our decisions to meet the contextual dynamics in which we're a part of. And, this can look like all different kinds of things. It could look like softening your tone, pausing conversations until you feel like you're emotionally and physically stable enough to have that conversation. It could be clarifying boundaries, going back to what are my core values and am I acting in alignment with that? And if I didn't, how might I act more in alignment with that value? And I think the big thing with this cycle is to recognize that this is not a linear framework. You can actually start anywhere in this cycle and it doesn't end. And if you're trying to improve your emotional intelligence, for an example here, then you could start in an awareness phase, or if you've already done an emotional intelligence assessment, you might already know exactly what you need to work on, and you can start in the evaluation phase, and you can say, how am I doing in this regard, and what could I do differently, and the things that I've already tried, did they work, and so on. And you can start in that evaluation phase, start making the adjustments, and go back to the awareness and then the evaluation. And, because our leadership is a constant growth journey, it doesn't end when you make adjustments, because sometimes the adjustments that we make don't actually fix the problem. And so we have to go back and we have to try a different adjustment, and we have to ask, did that adjustment do what we wanted it to do? And if it didn't, then we go back again. And so I think recognizing that this is a cyclical practice that we need to return to regularly, and especially for ourselves, if we are learning and growing every day, then we are never going to be approaching circumstances in the same way. And we also have to recognize that we are a part of the larger collective, and every single person that we are interacting with is going to come in as new versions of themselves as well. And so if we are consistently growing and other people are consistently growing, then we are just pushing and pushing and pushing our growth patterns. And, that's the goal, right? So let's take maybe a quick moment and let's do a guided reflection. I would like to make this as practical as possible. So what I would like for you to do, if you're joining now or if you're watching on the replay, is to go ahead and take another deep breath in and a slow exhale out. And I want you to close your eyes and soften your gaze. Take another long, deep breath. And I want you to gently bring to mind a recent moment in your leadership experience. Maybe something from this past week where something didn't quite feel right, or it felt off in how you showed up. And I want you to ask yourself the questions. What was happening to me in that moment? What was happening in my body, in my beliefs, and in the story that I was telling myself about that circumstance? What perspectives or details might I have missed? And what might I choose to do differently next time? And once you've got a few things in your mind, what can you actually commit to adjusting right now so that you can be in better alignment in the future? And now, as you're exploring this, I want you to just remember that there are no right answers to this. Everyone is on their own journey, and everyone has their own areas that they're going to have to focus in on. And your role in this process is to reflect on your unique experiences, your unique circumstances, and your unique needs. And I want to say, if anyone needs a couple of extra minutes to journal, feel free to keep doing that. I'm going to move into a case study of a manager who was overcompensating. And I'm going to hopefully try and bring this to life a little bit better for some of you. If you need to continue writing or journaling, you can always come back and focus in on the last little bit of this. So let's try and bring this to life a little bit with a mid-level manager who was constantly overcompensating in meetings. This person would jump in really quickly, try and fix issues. They would dominate the discussions, and they would leave other people feeling silenced because he thought that he was trying to support his team. Now, after going through the reflexivity cycle, this person was able to realize that his behaviors stemmed from deep-rooted fears around being perceived as incompetent. And this was rooted early on in their career because he was micromanaged and constantly felt undervalued. And by extension, he started to do that to his team. Now, with this person, we were able to move through the different phases of the LRC, and that is the reflexivity cycle. And so in the awareness phase, this person was able to recognize that he had anxiety before meetings, and he was able to notice that he was constantly speaking to try and prove himself. And in the evaluation phase, we explored the root of those fears, where they came from and how they were shaping him and his team dynamics, as well as different areas in which he could try to make adjustments, and which ones he felt comfortable and confident would get them to the outcome that they wanted to get to. And then in the adjustment phase, we actually had him practicing holding silence during meetings, inviting other people to speak first, and naming his intentions transparently so he wasn't unintentionally silencing his team. And over time, the team actually was able to start feeling a little bit more empowered, and this person developed a little bit deeper calm and trust with his team. And this is what we mean by reflexivity in action. And in order to fully understand how and why we need to do this, we have to start with recognizing that this work is not easy. Not now and not ever will it be easy. And that it is okay if you have struggled or are still struggling with implementing some of these aspects. And, regardless of what kind of barriers that you might be experiencing, whether it is internalized urgency or urgency that is being created in the cultures that you're in, whether it's fear of getting something wrong, not feeling like you don't have time or space to slow down, or feeling like you always have to have the answers as the leader. In order to get to the place that we want to be, we need to have a structure and supportive communities around us to come back to. All of the areas that we need to come back to. And so one thing that I want to recommend for everyone who's watching is to try and get a group of colleagues or peers together that you can regularly talk about some of the concepts that we're going to be talking about, and specifically creating a growth-oriented environment in which everyone has the same goal of learning and growing together. And as part of this, to explore the major themes and concepts that we're going to explore over the next year. Now, of course, it's always easier and better, I think, to do it with your own teams and your own peers. But if you are not at a place where you are comfortable doing that yet, or do not have the environmental support from your peers and your colleagues to actually learn and grow in this way, then you are always invited to come and to explore in this context. Now, as we move forward with the webinar series and I learn a little bit more about technology and how to invite people to participate in the webinars, then hopefully we'll have a nice group of people who can come on and you can explore in this context. And with that, I want to say thank you all so much for being in this space with me today. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your ability to pause and to reflect, and for your internal honesty. And I want everyone to remember that this is not about perfection. It is truly about practice and returning inward to yourself so that you can find the clarity that you need to step into your next evolution of your leadership. Now, the next newsletter is going to drop on November 4th, and in that newsletter, we're going to be exploring how to notice before you react, and specifically, how do you build space into the moments throughout your day that matter so that you can pause and notice so that you can then get insights that you can act on. Until then, I hope you all will stay connected. And if this work does resonate with you, I hope that you will share it with someone that you trust, whether you invite them into this space or you try to build a community of conscious leaders wherever you are who are willing to do the deep work. We are all in this together, and I really appreciate you all with so much love and so much gratitude. I'm going to go ahead and close out the webinar here, but I will hang around for anyone who has questions or concerns, and I will see you all soon.